It has been almost 50 years since the last human being set foot on the lunar surface, and the question still echoes through every forgotten archive and static-filled transmission. Were budget constraints really the reason we never went back? Or did NASA quietly discover something that changed the course of human exploration forever? Official history says it was money and politics, but the men who were there, the ones who came home and never slept again, would tell you that it was something else entirely, something we were never meant to see. Between 1969 and 1972, 6 Apollo missions touched the moon, each more ambitious than the last, until the final one, Apollo 17, brought Eugene Cernan, Harrison Schmitt, and Ronald Evans home to a hero's welcome aboard the USS Ticonderoga on December 19, 1972. America had won the space race, the Soviets had been humbled, and President Nixon had his trophy. But behind the victory banners and parades, 3 additional missions, 18, 19, and 20, were already in development, fully funded, fully equipped, and suddenly, inexplicably, canceled. The public explanation was cost. The program had ballooned from $7 billion to over $20, and taxpayers were losing patience. Yet those who worked in the darker corridors of the agency whispered that the cancellations were not a retreat, they were a cover-up. By the mid-70s, telemetry specialists at Langley spoke in low tones about Project Selene, a classified continuation of the Apollo initiative. There were rumors of a silent launch from a desert airfield, of a Saturn V assembled from spare parts, its markings erased, its crew sworn into secrecy. The purpose, they said, was not exploration, but investigation. During the final days of Apollo 17, Mission Control received a series of anomalous readings from the Taurus-Littrow Valley, radio distortions that repeated every 7 seconds, faint but rhythmic, like a coded pulse buried inside the static. The signal seemed to emanate from beneath the surface, from a region no probe had ever mapped. When they triangulated the source, it didn't match any known geological structure. It was almost mechanical. According to one of the mission's surviving engineers, a man who later vanished under unexplained circumstances, Selene 1 launched in the summer of 1976. Its official manifest was blank, its existence wiped from congressional records. The 6-member crew was told they were testing new life support systems, but once they cleared Earth's orbit, they began receiving encrypted directives from a channel not recognized by Houston. The messages were brief, clinical, and increasingly unsettling. Maintain altitude. Observe crater 53. Do not transmit anomalies. The crew followed orders until they saw the light. At first, it appeared as a reflection, a flicker glinting off the edge of the Sea of Tranquility. Then it moved, slowly, deliberately, circling their command module like a satellite with purpose. The onboard radar showed nothing. Commander Hale, a decorated veteran of Gemini 10, switched to a secondary frequency to report visual contact, but Houston's response came 3 minutes late and sounded wrong. The cadence, the tone, the phrasing, it was human, but not familiar. Hale logged the event as unidentified orbital object, though later recordings revealed a more direct description. Metallic cylinder, illumination from aft, no visible propulsion. When the module's exterior camera finally captured an image, it showed a structure casting a shadow across the lunar plain, angular, vast, not of natural origin. Upon descent, Selene 1 touched down 8 miles off target, near an uncharted crater. Their landing telemetry glitched. Houston claimed solar interference, but when Hale reviewed the footage, the clock skipped exactly 14 seconds, the same duration that would later vanish from every recovered transmission. Outside, the moon was not the silent, lifeless world they'd been promised. their boots pressed into powder, but the prints beneath them were already there, deeper, narrower, forming patterns that stretched towards the crater's rim. The men followed them, hearts hammering in the vacuum of their suits. What they found should have been impossible. The remains of another lander, half buried in dust, its panels scorched, its flag burned away. Cyrillic letters etched on the hull confirmed what no one had ever admitted. The Soviets had beaten them there. Inside the wreck, there were suits, 2, maybe 3, torn open from the inside. The helmets were crushed, the visors shattered outward. No bodies remained. The metal walls bore gouges as though something with strength beyond measure had raked through them. Then came the sound, not through the comms, but through the hull itself, a low pulsing vibration that climbed through their bones. Hale ordered immediate ascent, but Houston denied the request, citing fuel recalibration. That's when they saw movement, shadows on the ridgeline, slow, deliberate, watching. The figures were tall, thin, silvered by starlight, and as they advanced, the static in the headsets became voices, faint, whispering their names. The transmission log ends there. When Selene 1's signal reappeared 42 hours later, its trajectory showed it had left the moon, but the crew's biometric data was wrong. Their heartbeats were identical, synchronized to a rhythm of precisely 67 beats per minute. Hale's final words before re-entry were recorded on a secure channel, later erased. "They're not gone. They came with us." The capsule splashed down in the Pacific under heavy military escort, and every record of its recovery was classified. For decades, the story slept beneath layers of bureaucracy, surfacing only in fragments: an intercepted radio call, a leaked photo, a whistleblower interview. In 2015, an anonymous post on Reddit claimed to be written by a British psychologist who debriefed the survivors of a joint Anglo-Soviet lunar retrieval in 1990. The author described men who screamed at the sight of mirrors, who refused to sleep in the dark, who claimed the moon was hollow and alive. According to his notes, seismic sensors left behind by Apollo missions had recorded vibrations long after the impact tests had ended. During the Apollo 12 experiment, when the ascent stage was deliberately crashed into the surface, the moon rang like a bell for nearly an hour, an echo that should have been impossible on a solid body. NASA called it resonance, others called it breathing. Whistleblowers like retired Sergeant Bob Dean and former Air Force technician Carl Wolf later went public with stories that pushed disbelief to its edge. Dean spoke of destroyed film reels from Apollo 11, footage showing vast geometric structures on the far side. Wolf claimed he saw those very images while repairing equipment at Langley in 1965, towers, domes, and bridges stretching across shadowed plains. Both men died within days of each other in 2018. Dean suffered a sudden heart attack. Wolf was struck by a vehicle while cycling near his home in New York. Their files were seized before investigators arrived. Coincidence, maybe, or cleanup. Even Apollo veterans had their moments of doubt. Gene Cernan once described hearing music on the far side of the moon, a whistling, rhythmic pattern his instruments couldn't explain. NASA called it radio interference, but recordings reveal something unsettling. Beneath the tone, faint human syllables. During Apollo 15, David Scott and James Irwin reported finding parallel tracks at the base of Mount Hadley, linear, uniform, as if carved by machinery. Their rover was the first of its kind, yet the tracks extended miles beyond its range. The incident was redacted from official transcripts. The most disturbing rumors, however, center on Apollo 11 itself. 3 days into the mission, Armstrong reportedly asked Houston to confirm the position of the Saturn V's third stage. It was said to be 6,000 miles behind them, yet something metallic traveled beside their craft, reflecting sunlight like a mirror. Mission Control suggested debris. Armstrong disagreed. After landing, a 2-minute blackout in transmissions occurred. On a secondary medical channel, unbroadcast to the public, Armstrong allegedly described metallic shapes at the crater's edge, luminous structures descending underground. Those words never appeared in the official record. When questioned years later, Armstrong smiled but didn't deny it. His silence spoke louder than any confession. In the years since, unmanned probes from the US, China, and India have mapped the moon in exquisite detail. Yet despite the technology, the same areas remain obscured, pixels blurred, coordinates missing. Some believe these are glitches, others believe they're deliberate omissions, covering vast constructs that rise like cathedrals from the dust. Amateur astronomers have photographed lights in craters that pulse at regular intervals as though responding to something unseen. When NASA's Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter sent back high-resolution images of the Apollo landing sites, analysts noticed one anomaly. Near the remnants of Apollo 17's rover, a set of fresh footprints leading away, far beyond the recorded limits of the EVA. No explanation was given. Over time, the myth has evolved that the moon is not a dead rock, but an engineered shell, a vessel of impossible age. Supporters of the hollow moon theory point to the seismic data, to magnetic fields that shouldn't exist, to echoes that linger longer than stone should allow. They say it is a construct, a watchtower orbiting Earth, its purpose unknown, its occupants silent. The skeptics laugh, but those who have worked in the deep programs, who have seen the classified photographs, no longer laugh. They drink too much, move too often, die too young. Even now, half a century later, the transmissions continue. Amateur radio operators have intercepted bursts on the old VHF bands, sequences that match the cadence of the Selene 1 pulse. Every 7 seconds, a tone. Every 7th transmission, a word. Return. When questioned, NASA attributes the signals to interference from satellites. Yet one man, a retired flight director named Alan Reed, once claimed he recognized the voice embedded within the noise. He said it was Commander Hale. Hale had been dead for 30 years. There are nights when the moon rises blood orange over the horizon, and for a moment it almost feels alive, as if it's turning its face toward us. The craters look like eyes. The shadows shift even when the Earth is still. Scientists call it an illusion, a trick of refraction, but those who've stared through the long-range scopes at observatories know better. They've seen glints, brief, sharp flashes of movement, like metallic doors closing far beneath the surface. One technician at Mauna Kea quit after witnessing what he described as a ripple in the dust, like something large moving underneath a thin skin. Maybe that's why every new proposal for a manned lunar mission stalls. Maybe the budgets and politics are just convenient excuses. For decades, aerospace corporations have drafted plans for colonies, for mining operations, for permanent bases. But each time the funding vanishes and the executives resign without explanation. The silence is too consistent to be coincidence. Somewhere deep within NASA's archives, sealed behind clearance codes that no longer exist, lie the final mission logs of Selene 1. They were marked for declassification in 2025, but the deadline passed quietly. The files remained locked, their contents redacted. Those who have read the summaries say they end with a single sentence handwritten in red ink across the final page. They warned us not to come back. And maybe that's the real reason we never did.